Hi, I'm Instana CTO Chris Bailey, and welcome to another installation of the Inside Instana webcast. Now, I'm joined by Mai, who works on our business observability team. So, Mai, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've been working on?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Hameed, and I am an engineer on the business observability part of Instana. And we've been working really hard on this for quite a bit now, and we have a lot of very new features and things that we would love to show off, and a lot of things coming down the pipe. So, yeah.
Yeah, so business observability kind of builds on top of Instana's capture of like every IT request going through the system, but does that to capture business processes from BPM, so business process management tools like IBM Business Activity Workflow, the open source Camunda BPM, JBPM, and a whole bunch of others, right?
Absolutely, yes, it does. And so we are trying to really bridge that gap between business and IT to use what Instana already excels at by capturing data with a lot of tools that are now growing in use to automate business processes to build better insight into the IT infrastructure of business processes.
Okay, so this like lets us track from like end user monitoring, so someone using a website that does something that triggers the start of a business process, then we can track the various stages of that business process, including business data like invoice numbers or user IDs or customer names and so on.
Absolutely, yes, yes. And so we've been doing a lot of testing with various different BPM tools, and we were able to, capture details all the way down to duration of activities within the business process, errors, latency, all of these very, very nitty-gritty, fine details, and really use Instana's already large wealth of information and integrate well with Instana as a whole. And because we're quite new, we still have a long way to go, and there's a lot coming down the pipe. We have a lot of really big ideas. So, yeah.
Cool. Let's take a look and see what we've got.
Absolutely, let's do it. So here we are, and we have a classic Instana screen, and I want to highlight here the business monitoring widget. So of course, this is a new feature we have on the left-hand navigation side, a new business monitoring page. And we did add, and integrate into Instana already by adding a widget for business monitoring here in the home page where you can already see a bunch of information. So these are business processes, right? So different processes that our customers would build in their BPM tools. And here we already have an overview of the different very useful data that they can look at. For example, the name, of course, the number of activities, the number of runs, and the current IT health, which is something that we do want to highlight. So this is something that Instana already has to really showcase the health of IT and different things like websites, and we've expanded that to include health of business processes, right? So let's go to the business monitoring page right now. And here we can see two tabs. Let's start with the processes tab. So like I mentioned, these are the different business processes we have, and these were captured with both Camunda and BAW, like you mentioned, and all consolidated into one lovely dashboard here. We can, work through all the different time windows, last 5 minutes. You can see the number of started processes. Let's just go the last 7 days. Obviously, you can see at a glance which processes were run more often than others. You can look at the number of activities as well as the health, right?
So each of these is kind of like invoice receipts, so the individual submission of a receipt. So we've had like 17,000 receipts that have been submitted.
Absolutely, in the last 7 days, right? So we are able to really capture this mass amount of data and really, once we dig into it, so let's take a look at this invoice receipt process. get all of these very fine grade information. So here we can see a count graph over time, right? So at a glance, if I as an SRE can look at this, we can see that this process is consistently run on a daily basis for the last week. So I immediately know that this is quite important in terms of business functionality, right? On the right-hand side here, we see our top activities because, of course, a business process is made up of multiple activities that need to run.
Yep.
So here we can see, based off of latency, the approve invoice at the very top. We can also switch to calls and see the archive invoice is run more and more often than the other activities.
Yep.
We can also look at the erroneous call rate. Luckily here, we don't have any major issues, which is great for me. And then if we head over to the activities tab, we can see all of the activities that make up the process, right? And we can sort them by duration and see that the approve invoice does take the longest at 373 milliseconds, right?
Yep.
So this is really useful information that I as an SRE can use to then talk to our business analysts and really explain which part of the process might be the slowest. Yep. And where we need to allocate resources to really help speed that up over time, right? So if we go back to the summary, we also have charts and information that are familiar to regular Instana users as well. So we have a connection between the process and the infrastructure issues and changes over time, latency with different measurement data.
So this is all of like the IT infrastructure, so things like hosts or containers or instances of Java processes, because most BPMs are Java, that actually supports the business process.
Absolutely.
So I guess the aim of this is, right, I might see that my business process stops, and it might be because I'm having an IT issue that's causing the problem at the BPM. So we can now chain the two together. We can understand, business processes being impacted and the IT issues that cause it.
Absolutely, and that's exactly right. So Instana users are familiar with this issues tab over here. And here we set up a few example test errors, right? So we can see that if this process is impacted, we can drill down really quickly as to why. So these are just simple test warnings that I set up, but you can, similar to other elements of Instana, set up alerts against different pieces of the business process, right? So you can set up alerts on duration of activities, the count of activities, anything that you really want to measure, and you get very fine-grained control of that, right? So if I go back, let's say I want to analyze the instances of this invoice receipt, right? We've got 17,000 calls in the last 7 days, but let's take a look at what that really means. So here we have each call over the last 7 days. We can click into that, and then we can really take a look at each individual call detail, right? If we really want to drill down and see what each call is doing, we can take a look at the groups.
So that's like that end-to-end chain for an individual invoice being submitted, right? It goes to like invoice submitted, invoice being processed, invoice improved or not approved, invoice archived, and it's that end-to-end chain for that specific invoice.
Absolutely, okay. Because we know, for example, if our customer, each business process is run for their single customer and their customer has an issue, they don't know why. This is a great way to look into that, right? We can drill down into one call, look at that end-to-end, really trace where the issue comes from, and
Does that mean we can support the scenario where like maybe a customer goes to help desk and says like, I've submitted my invoice, like is this invoice number? We can now actually say how far across the process it is, why it might be stuck, and so on.
Absolutely. So you are able to search by that process number. Here you can see that within this analytics tab that Instana users are very familiar with, you can filter by process definition ID and instance ID, so you can pinpoint down to the exact call that you're looking at and take a look at every single activity that has run and take a look at all of the call details as well. Like over here, you can see the activity name, type, and ID. So these are business process properties that have been taken from Camunda, as you can see over here.
Yeah, and I know you can optionally actually get the real kind of like business data. So we can get the invoice amount, the creditor, the name of the submitter, and so on. But of course, you have to opt into that because PII, information security, and so on.
Absolutely, exactly, right? Cool. And that's something that is also coming down the pipe, is giving our customers more fine-grained control as to the data that they want to see in Instana from their BPM tools. So that is something we're working on currently, and we're very happy to show. So this is an example of looking at business processes and their associated activities that support the processes, and looking at the IT infrastructure that all support that.
Yep.
Of course, users have access to Instana's wealth of features to then analyze the process and look at any root cause issues and resolve those. Something that we did release quite recently is business perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are familiar with Instana, similar to application perspectives, we do have the requests that people want to see and really combine different business processes into a perspective, right?
Yeah, and this is because business processes can call other business processes.
Exactly.
So I guess an example might be a supply chain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So someone buying something on an e-commerce site, that actually is going to have order fulfillment, and then after order fulfillment you have order shipping.
Absolutely.
Right? So those might be separate processes that call each other, and of course you want to track it end to end.
Exactly, and so you can group those together and really take a look at that entire kind of bundle, that entire group of processes as one perspective. So these are different examples that we threw together, right? And so when you click on a perspective, you can configure them and really set the filter as to how you want to collect those processes. So we have, if I were to show you, when we create a perspective, we can really filter based off of a lot of different tags here that are ever expanding, right? So for example, let's just say, I don't know, I want to track all of the processes running on a Linux host machine. Let's say I want to really make sure that we are allocating the right resources to each machine. We can create that. We can give it a name, my test perspective. And then when we create that, here we go, we have a new test perspective.
Okay.
So let's go back here. So another example is, with different regions, right? So you can filter by the region that all of the processes are running on, and really look at the resource consumption or the latency of different regions to see where you need to scale up or down and things like that. So this is very valuable. It's very highly customizable and is very useful according to what we've heard.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So lots of stuff has been built in terms of, I don't know, maybe a foundation, right? So we're now auto-discovering that you've got BPMs deployed. We're auto-discovering the process on the BPM. We automatically track the execution of that process. We have the relationship between processes and infrastructure, and now we can build processes of processes, or we can slice, and say, okay, I want to separate, a process that's maybe driven from one geographic region versus another, which is all really useful. Now, what's coming next? What are we building on top of this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So currently right now we want to work on role-based access control, right? Because in large companies, large teams, we really want to make sure that we allow people to control what other people have access to.
And in particular, putting controls around some of that, customer data that certain people should be able to see and others. Yeah.
Exactly. So we want to, focus on security. We know that's a priority for a lot of our folks, and we want to put in the effort to make sure that they have access to that across, all of Instana. We already have that availability, and we want to extend that to business monitoring as well. So that's coming next. And like I mentioned, better business process properties, right? So you're able to configure your BPM tool to add some more tags, right? So you can give custom tags to your BPMs and your processes, and then have that propagate down to Instana, so you can use those tags in your filtering and your checking of your processes. So those are the major two that we're working on right now. Business monitoring was closed to select users, but now we are opening it up to general Instana, so anyone who has access to Instana will also have access to business monitoring. So that is coming in release 282, and we're very excited to have everyone check us out.
Okay. So thank you, May. I think we've got some really exciting stuff here, and of course more exciting stuff coming.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.